Also a OMSCS student at Georgia Tech and founder of Beer.js at Voronezh. And few words about the talk. Have you ever heard about Flipper? Maybe, yes, some heard. So it's a debugging platform used by Meta, Facebook, and soon it will be available in the headless mode. And more about it will be presented soon by Andrey Goncharov.
Thank you, guys, and thank you for these flattering words. I'd say that it was a bit of exaggeration. I'm not that much of a speaker, but well, you got to do what you got to do to get to this conference. So here I am. Once again, hello everybody. Today we're going to talk about Flipper. It's a debugging platform for your mobile and pretty much any kind of hardware. And over the last year, we've been working relentlessly to reimagine what Flipper is and what it can do. And today I'm going to tell you how we're pushing Flipper from being just a desktop developer tooling application to becoming a crucial part of the automated verification procedure in our CI and hopefully your CI workflow. So before we start, let me open with a short introduction. This is me snowboarding, but this is not my hand. And my name is Andrey. I'm a software engineer from London. I work on Flipper full-time at Meta. And our plan for today is to cover what Flipper is and what it is not. To talk about how we're enabling programmatic access to Flipper, aka headless mode, how you can benefit from it. And, well, why you should use Flipper. And conclude with how we're integrating headless Flipper into Meta's infrastructure, how we use it, how we plan to benefit from it ourselves, and maybe you'll get an inspiration to do yourself in your company. And yeah, you kind of stole one of my questions. I was about to ask how many of you guys know what Flipper is, and I saw some hands. So yeah, I'm still going to ask the second question. It was not too many hands for those of you who know what Flipper is. But have you ever written a custom Flipper plugin? Anyone? Please. Yeah, I did. Okay. Then this talk is probably going to be even more interesting to you because we'll cover what custom plugins can do, and hopefully I'll inspire you, or at least kind of give you a gentle push to try writing a custom Flipper plugin. So Flipper is lots of words. Flipper is a platform for debugging iOS, Android, and reactive native applications, blah, 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 blah. This is clearly a joke. I don't hear too many laughs, so probably it was a bad joke. Sorry about that. So what Flipper actually is, it's Chrome DevTools for your mobile device, or, as I said before, any kind of device which can run Flipper client. And under the hood, in essence, Flipper is basically a device discovery service with a message bus. And yeah, actually, the thing that makes it really powerful is plugins. Both open source plugins that we ship out of the box and the plugins that our users write for themselves. And now let's take a look at how it all works. So we have Flipper and some mobile phones there. Next, we have some sort of developer bridge like ADB for Android, IDB for iOS, Metro for React Native, or whatever that helps us to discover all these devices. And next, once we discover all these devices, we can display them in our fancy or not so fancy UI. So far, so good. And the best part is that once we discover all these devices, we can start the device plugins, which can talk to the devices and do various stuff like, for instance, logging. It's one of our open source plugins to fetch the logs from your device. or CPU utilization, or many, many more other device plugins. And that's actually only the half of this story. Flipper also starts a WebSocket server that accepts connections from the apps to the devices. Oh, sorry, from the apps on the devices to Flipper itself. So, well, we can see all these wonderful applications starting using their Flipper client to connect to our WebSocket server, and then once we discover these applications, we can display them in our UI. And now, once we discovered all these applications, we create a WebSocket message bus, which allows our plugins from the desktop part, from the Flipper part, to talk to the plugins in the devices. So basically, every plugin consists of two parts. We have a universal part, the desktop part, which works for any client, whether it's Android device, iOS device, React Native, or any other client. Recently, we've shipped a JavaScript client to talk from the JavaScript applications to our Flipper. So you write your desktop plugin once, and then you can use it for any kind of client. And on the client side, well, it's usually written in native language. So for Android, it's Java, Kotlin. For iOS, it's Swift, Objective-C, and whatever. And when these plugins start, they now can use this WebSocket message bus to talk to each other. And here's where magic happens. So now I'd like to let your imagination run free. I urge you to think about how you could apply Flipper. I'm going to give you here a couple of moments to think about it, and I'm going to grab a sip of water. Come on, guys, I don't see sweating faces. Think, think, think. Yeah, probably it was not the best idea after lunch, huh? So, one of the ideas that we have and how we use Flipper internally is that we use it to peek into the state of our applications. So every application is different, and usually the state is transient, it's in memory, but sometimes you really want to take a peek at what's happening inside of your application. So you write a custom plugin. You write it once for the desktop, then you write the counterparts for every platform, and there you go. You can see at your whim the state of your application whenever you want it to. Then you can expect the application layout, and that's an open source plugin. Or you can tell your app to go to a specific screen programmatically. Ooh. You can also simulate hardware signals. So for instance, you have some fancy hardware device you need to integrate your phone with. You want to test your application integration with that device, and you don't have that many devices on hand. For instance, you're a huge corporation with thousands of employees, and you have only 100 of new fancy hardware devices. Then you can use Flipper to kind of imitate the behavior of the device and the data that it sends to your application. How cool is that? And you can also run commands on your device and tell your application to do something. So once again, you can test. That way you can test any kind of integration with anything using Flipper. On to the next part. How Flipper changes and why am I moving away from the Electron monolith? So Flipper consists of two parts. We have the stateful part, which is the message bus and the device discovery service, and we have the UI, which is a React application that lives inside of Electron. And so far, for a long time, it's been living under a single roof of the Electron application. And the Electron application started the Node.js process inside of it, with the device discovery and message bus, and the sibling process, the browser process, where we had the React web application. And the problem with this approach is that what's going to happen when you have a remote device somewhere in your cloud and you want to connect your Flipper to that remote device? Well, you could do port forwarding for both device discovery and WebSocket connections. But it's getting more complicated if you use your laptop, or maybe you have multiple laptops, or maybe multiple workstations, and you have some shared developer infrastructure, developer machine remotely. Then you kind of want to start Flipper there and somehow see what's happening there from your laptop. And that remote environment could connect to your cloud devices. And once again, you can solve this problem if you use RDP, but, well, could you raise your hands if you like RDP, remote desktop environment? Like seeing your screen from remote machine on your laptop? Yeah, no hands. Yeah, and I'm not raising mine. It's not the best developer experience, is it? So the other problem is that if you're using any kind of automation, it's kind of hard to teach you automated script, to use RDP, to click on some buttons using that RDP to interact with the remote environment, right? So it's unclear how that automated script could communicate to Flipper running remotely. It's unclear how Flipper could react to any kind of events that this automated script sends. It's unclear how this remote Flipper could transfer the messages from the automated script to the cloud. And over the last year, we've been working on splitting the Electron monolith in two independent parts, Flipper UI and Flipper Server. Then we could let the automation script run Flipper UI and use Flipper UI to talk to Flipper Server. Yeah, that dolphin head on the automation part, it means kind of our front end of Flipper UI. So the same setup also works perfectly for the remote developer environment. Well, we can run Flipper on our laptop, the UI. Then we can run the Flipper Server part. In the remote environment, they can somehow magically talk to each other, and then the backend part, the Flipper Server, can talk to your remote device. Woo! And last, as a bonus, now Flipper UI, as it's a web application, it's easily integratable with your browser or any kind of anything that runs a web view. So if you have some sort of different developer tooling that runs in the web, you can add your Flipper screen there. You can use an iframe to add it pretty much anywhere that runs a web. You can use web views to integrate it anywhere else, whether it's mobile, native, whatever. So browsers are cool, yeah. And as a result, that's what we currently have, and that's where we're going. We haven't removed the Electron part yet. It's still there. Flipper is still available as an Electron app. But we are kind of thinking that maybe in the future we're going to remove that. We'll ask you, the community, to maybe vote, express your opinions. But what's definitely is going to happen is that Flipper is going to be available as two different applications. One application is a Node.js headless application that provides an API, and another one is a web application that talks over WebSockets to the Node.js counterpart. On to the next part. Well, we've covered how Flipper can become headless, how we kind of decapitated Flipper. And now let's think about how we can enable that programmatic access for the automated scripts to use Flipper. So let's recall the high-level architecture. We have some sort of UI. Now we know that this is a web application. We have a different Node.js application running somewhere, either on the same machine or remotely. Who cares? And we have some mobile devices somewhere, either on your table, either emulators on your machine, or maybe emulators somewhere in the cloud. And the problem here is that, well, in that red circle, as you can see, the client state, the plugin state lives on the client in the UI itself. So if we remove the UI, and if we want our headless client to talk to our devices, then it means that our headless client, for instance, terminal or a CLI application, is now, well, it has to re-implement all the logic on how to allow these plugins, how to execute them. And, well, we as developers are inherently lazy, right? Well, DRY, don't repeat yourself, didn't create itself, that kind of philosophy, right? We want to reuse stuff that we already have. And here we have several options. We could possibly make our headless client a Node.js application. But then the problem is in that Node.js part. It means that we are severely limiting potential options of how other people could integrate with Flipper. And that's going to be another question. And it's going to be a tough one. Who loves JavaScript? Yeah, I kind of do. Yeah, don't be shy, please. Okay, so that's my point. We don't want to force everyone to write JavaScript to talk to Flipper. We want anyone to use any kind of language, any kind of platform to talk to Flipper. So Node.js is not really a good option. And another idea is that, well, we already have the Node.js process here, so why don't we move the plugin state there? The problem here is that for ages, people have been writing plugins, assuming that the plugins are going to be run in a browser. And somehow now we have to either force people to rewrite their plugins, which is bad, and probably people will just stop using Flipper, or we have to somehow expose plugin API. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here. We're using the same WebSocket connection from Flipper server to Flipper client, and we expose the plugin API over the wire. We serialize the data, we serialize the arguments, and we send them back and forth. And therefore, as a result, we move the plugin state from our client to our server. And as a result, we can share the code between our Flipper server, our plugin manager that lives in Flipper server, and the plugin manager that lives in Flipper UI in a browser. Whew. Now it's demo time. Yeah, I wanted to do it live, but I'm too much of a chicken to do it. Oops. So I recorded a video for you. So here's a demo of how you can play tic-tac-toe with the UI on your mobile. So and it kind of demonstrates what Flipper can do. So you can exchange any kind of messages between your mobile phone and your desktop Flipper application. And now, with the introduction of Headless Flipper, we can do the same thing from our terminal. Yeah, just give me a second to switch. So what happens here is that now we start the same plugin, tic-tac-toe, that runs on the desktop part. We start it on Flipper server side, and we use it to play tic-tac-toe from our terminal. Yeah, that's basically me losing at tic-tac-toe. So yeah, this is it. This is Flipper running tic-tac-toe in your terminal and in your UI, whatever you want. And what that means is that we now have lots of potential applications for Headless Flipper. And I'm going to tell you about some of them that we are trying to adopt at Meta. First, at Meta we have a design verification procedure. So, well, our designer comes up with some fancy design, we do our best job to implement that thing. And previously, the developers, they had to use Flipper UI, start it manually, sometimes it crashed. They had to navigate to the plugin manually click on different buttons to upload screenshots and stuff. And well, I don't know about you, but I don't like using new tools unless I really, really have to. So what we are trying to do and what's going to happen is that we're going to use our favorite terminals to do the same very thing. So a developer is going to enter a command in a terminal. The terminal is going to activate the Flipper plugin that the developers used before in the UI, but this time the plugin is going to live in Flipper server. This plugin is going to command the device to take a screenshot. Once the screenshot is back in the plugin is going to submit this screenshot to the cloud, to our version control, source version control system, and then the designer could go there and verify that the screenshot matches the design or not. And another idea, which I like even more personally, is that potentially we can use Flipper in our end-to-end tests. So at Meta, we have Jest end-to-end infrastructure. So Jest manages the heavy lifting behind the running end-to-end tests. We have some other cloud with device emulators somewhere, and what happens is that developers, they type the command to run the end-to-end test suite in the cloud, just listens to that command, and it runs the end-to-end test suite on some remote mobile devices. So far, so cool. And the developers can see the result of that test suite in their browsers. And what we're trying to do is we want to give some more insight on what happens inside of the end-to-end suite to every developer. Oops. Yeah. Lovely. Sorry, guys. You are too polite. Cool. Let me roll back. And there I was thinking, why don't you laugh at this? Okay. All right, we've laughed. And yeah, kind of missed the best joke of my presentation. But while you live, you learn. So yeah, that was the joke about the design verification, right? You got it. Blah, blah, command, submit, plugin, blah, blah, submit back, and upload the screenshot to our source version control. Again, testing. We have terminals at developer machines. We have browsers. We have just end-to-end infrastructure somewhere in the cloud that manages all of this stuff. And now the developer, they type their command to start the end-to-end suite, and end-to-end test suite for some reason fails. What do? Usually we just scratch our heads at some console logs and spend the entire day trying to debug the test suite. But there we were thinking that if we add Flipper, which could expose the logs from the device, the layout from the device, basically any kind of information that we have inside of the application, and we already have the plugins for that application. So what if we kind of use Flipper server, add it to every device, and then transmit the data from Flipper server to our browser. So whenever your end-to-end test suite fails, you can instantly see what was the state of the application, what was the layout, what was the logs. So no more test failures, or at least unexpected and unexplained test failures. Okay, it's the right slide this time. And now, once again, we can explore wild ideas. So once we have Flipper there, why don't we start using Flipper to do the actual testing? What if we, well, as I said before, Flipper can take a peek inside of your application's state if you write a corresponding plugin. And at Meta, we have tons of plugins for lots of applications. So if we already have these plugins. They already have the data. They already have the state. Why don't we automate our hard labor of manually looking at the application state, and instead using some automated procedures to write integration tests to automatically verify that the state of the application matches exactly what we have there? We haven't implemented that yet, and it's just an idea. But if you decide to play with that idea, let us know on Twitter. And at last, I have run out of useful or not so useful information for you at this point. Here are the links to the code with demos if you decide to play with Flipper yourself. By all means, feel free to tag us on Twitter and ask any questions. And reach out to me personally if you want that. This is legal stuff, links to the images that I used in the slide deck. And this QR code links to this slide deck. It was a pleasure to meet you all. And let's make the developer experience better.
And looks like we have 7 minutes for some questions, if there are any.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. So you've presented this great tool, Flipper, to us, but how about these plugins? We still have to use JavaScript for writing plugins that we need to use, right?
So yeah, for the desktop part, you need to use TypeScript, actually. It's a little bit better than JavaScript, hopefully. And we did our best to make it as easy as possible. So we provide, as some sort of a platform, as a framework, we provide lots of default components out of the box. So usually what people do, they just supply the data and provide the mapping on how to display their data. Most of the plugins, they are simple tables. Basically, usually what people want to see is what happens inside of the device, what state the application has. And then you can use a simple table to do that. And we provide these tables out of the box.
Okay, so you've mentioned also IDB, that's I think it's maintained by Facebook.
Yeah.
That you use to bridge communication with simulators, I guess, or other devices. So what really holds us from writing Swift plugins ourselves and running some small web server on, I guess, CI machines and handcrafting plugins ourselves and running them on devices?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the main benefit of Flipper is the idea that you write it once and run it anywhere. So if you are focused solely on iOS development, then maybe it doesn't make too much sense, or at least it's not going to be too much easier for you to use Flipper. Yes, you can write any kind of desktop UI yourself. However, well, we already have done that for you, so maybe you can use us. But once you have more than one platform, once you have not only iOS, but you also have Android, and maybe you have some React Native, and maybe you want to debug some of web applications that have, well, that share more or less the same state, that's where Flipper shines. So you can write this desktop plugin once, and the desktop plugin is usually where all the complex logic lives. So usually the client plugins, they just sync the data from the application to Flipper, and Flipper deals with this data and kind of manipulates the data and shows it in a fancy way to the user.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Looks like not. So thank you, Andrey.
Thank you, guys. It's been my pleasure to be here.